aggression accounted for 1/3 of all reports, and attacks against synagogues and Jewish institutions increased 61% in the past 2 years. We've also seen a big rise in boycott, divest, and sanction, the BDS movement, and that's reminiscent of the Nazis' cry, "Don't buy from the Jews." And on top of that, students are affected. There's been bullying in elementary school, starting from kindergarten, going all the way up through high school and at college campuses across the nation, from here at Rutgers in New Jersey, across the country to University of California, Berkeley. Nearly 1/3 of all Jewish college students reported that they experienced anti-Semitism directed at them on campus. In 2021, anti-Semitic acts peaked around the world with more than 10 incidents per day, and roughly 50% of those were in Europe. 90% of European Jews, when questioned, say that they feel unsafe in their home country because of all of these incidents that have occurred over the last 5 years. And almost half of them have been harassed at least once in the past year. So, why have I started my presentation tonight with this backdrop of the state of the world? Because we are not doing a good enough job of teaching future generations about the horrors of the Holocaust. In a recent Holocaust knowledge and awareness survey, it assessed the understanding of American and Canadian adults about the Holocaust, and the results were shocking. There were huge gaps in knowledge and basic awareness of the facts of the Holocaust. So in the US, 49% of millennials and 45% of all Americans couldn't name a single ghetto or concentration camp, and there are over 40,000 of them. The Canadians didn't do much better. More than half of Canadian millennials couldn't identify a single concentration camp either. Nearly 1/3 of all Americans and more than 4 in 10 millennials believe that substantially less than 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. Most think that it was under 100,000. And the majority of Americans, 80%, have never visited a Holocaust museum. In Canada, nearly 1/4 of Canadian millennials hadn't heard of or weren't sure if they had heard of the Holocaust at all.
Come on.
So those results are really sobering. But the good news is that these same survey participants also were questioned about the importance of Holocaust education. And 93% of them said that students should learn about the Holocaust in school. And 80% said it's important to keep teaching about the Holocaust so it doesn't happen again. I could not agree more. I don't think there can be enough books about the Holocaust. And if we don't properly educate the next generations, then we're all in terrible danger. Because if our citizens and governments don't take a stand against injustice and allow hate, extreme prejudice, and discrimination to flourish, then our very democracy is at stake. So I created Abe versus Adolf for a young adult audience so that they could connect with the survivor on a personal level and gain a true understanding of the impact of the Holocaust on an ordinary person. Knowing that 6 million innocent people were murdered, it's an impersonal statistic and it's hard to conceptualize. But by putting a face on the Holocaust and a name instead of a number, the hope is that the personal experiences of the survivor can invoke the reader's moral compass and awaken their sensitivity to others' suffering and find a deeper sense of common humanity. If the stories can tap into their emotions, then it can change their way of thinking and they'll see the Holocaust through the human lens. I also wove in World War II history so the reader gets a full understanding of what was happening in Europe and the surrounding world at that time. I like to think of my book as a one-stop Holocaust education. So if you don't ever read anything else or watch anything else about the Holocaust, you'll have a really good understanding of what happened. Most people are familiar with Anne Frank, but her diary stops when she and her family were discovered in their secret hiding place in Amsterdam and sent to the concentration camps. We don't know what happened to her every day after that, what she saw, how she felt, what it was like to be a teenage prisoner in a concentration camp. But Abe Peck fills in those gaps for us. We learned from Abe what Anne would have put in her diary if she hadn't been killed at 15 years old in Bergen-Belsen. One of the ways I promote my book is saying where Anne Frank's story leaves off, Abe's begins. Knowing that today's adolescents don't have a long attention span, and neither it seems to most adults, and YouTube is the world's second largest search engine, I wanted to capitalize on the visual culture of the 21st century. So in addition to writing Abe's story, I also created what's called an enhanced video ebook, or for short, video book. I think that seeing and hearing Abe's story directly from him will be the most meaningful and have the biggest emotional impact on viewers. So right now, I'm going to share with you my trailer, which is a preview of the video book. So it's a little over a minute long, and hopefully this will work properly. Okay, so I'm gonna bring that up now. And okay, I lost my trailer, which was open. Here it is, got it back.
Imagine what it was like as a teenager living through World War II. A Jewish teenager, forced to wear a Jewish star. Forced out of your home and into a ghetto. Ripped away from your family and sent to a working camp. Forced to work as a slave. Forced to march through the snow for days in the dead of winter with no food or water. Sent to concentration camps like Auschwitz.
When I got this, I was a teenager.
Buchenwald.
Early March, we came to Buchenwald.
Dachau.
Now, our job was to removing the dead bodies from the barracks.
Starved, beaten, and tortured for 5 years. But somehow you survive.
I fight all my life from all the relatives. I am the only one which want to talk about the Holocaust, how wrong it was, to remember that hate and discrimination is no good.
In Abe vs. Adolf, Abe Peck tells his captivating story of courage, resilience, and luck that carried him through one of the darkest times in human history. See it, read it, experience it for yourself.
I would like the world to remember. Please don't forget us when we are gone.
Okay, one moment. Okay, so how did I meet Abe Peck, that amazing man? I was volunteering for a nonprofit called Jewish Family Services. Oh, getting a little bit of okay. And I volunteered for the Holocaust Advisory Committee, which I'm still on about 10 years later, I think. I met a group of Holocaust survivors for the very first time. I had never met a Holocaust survivor before, so I had never seen a tattoo before. I had heard of them, but it was my first experience ever seeing one when a man there, who ends up being Abe Peck, rolls up his sleeve and shows me the tattoo. And he must have seen the horror on my face. So he says, no, this is a good thing. If I didn't have this, I would be dead. I would have been taken to the left, to the gas chamber. And instead, I went to the right to life. So I thought that was fascinating, to take one of the worst, most horrific things that's ever happened in history and to put a positive spin on it like that. So, as Richard told you, I'm a fiction writer. I'm not a historian. I'm not a biographer. But I met all these survivors and I felt, wow, somebody needs to do something. And while Steven Spielberg had, through the Shoah Foundation, videotaped tons of Holocaust survivors, and there's thousands of hours of testimony, they're just not accessible to the average person. It's more archival researchers, out at USC. So, for a teacher in a classroom, a student, for the average person to understand, just to know what happened to a Holocaust survivor, they have to really make a big effort. So I not only wrote Abe Heck's story, but I also created this video book, which I'm going to demonstrate for you shortly, which is in essence a full-length movie broken into short videos. That seems to be how our current generation learns, and probably the same for future generations. And with all of the deniers out there and the revisionists, I think it's really important for a survivor to tell his story himself. So I have both the book and the video. So anyway, I met with Abe, and my anthology, which is going to be a whole bunch of survivors, turned to a book about Abe by the second session of his interview, when I learned that this man had been in 9 different concentration camps and 2 death marches, and he had been beaten and shot, tortured, starved, diseased, and somehow, against impossible odds from the very beginning of the war, from September 1st, 1939 until the very tail end, he made it through. And he did not hide. He did not escape. He just went full on as a teenage boy right into the Nazi death camps and faced that brutality head on with nobody to help him. So it's really an incredible story. And I've had other Holocaust survivors read his book and say they think that he's the most extraordinary person of anybody that they have ever met or heard of. So you ask Abe, how did he do it? How did you survive the impossible? And he would tell you that he was lucky. He didn't do anything special, but I think he did. I think that he was very smart and he followed his instincts, and he made some good decisions that were critical to his survival. So he started out as just a very normal child, smart, athletic, family oriented, in this small town called Shattuck in Poland. He had 2 parents, his older sister Miriam, and a close-knit community. His mom was very well educated for the time and worked as a teacher, highly unusual because women were mostly uneducated and did not work. His dad owned a restaurant in town, and Abe went to public school until he was 13. He planned to go to high school, to gymnasium. He wanted to be a textile engineer and then go to college in Belgium like his mother did. But by the time he became a bar mitzvah at age 13, the Jews in the town were really uneasy about hearing all the bad news coming out of Germany. Hitler's radical views, his anti-Semitic methods, the way they were ostracizing Jews and oppressing them, removing them from the highest levels of government. So when Abe was only 14 years old, that is when the Germans started World War II, came into their town in only 3 days. They call it Blitzkrieg, the lightning war, because it happened so fast. I'm going to share my screen with you again, and I'm going to show you chapter 4, which is Abe telling you himself what happened when the Germans occupied Shattuck. Okay, bear with me while we start up, please. Okay, so this is my video book, and what makes it different from a regular book is that each chapter, so whoops, let me get back here. We're going to chapter 1. Each chapter has an embedded link in the beginning of the chapter. So you see right there.
My name is Abraham Peck. I was born November the 25th, 1924.
Okay, so a regular Kindle or Nook is not multimedia, so you just get the flat text. But through the iBookstore, you can get this multimedia version, the video ebook, and you can watch it on any type of device. So if you look at my, wait here, whoops, one more, my table of contents, you can see that there are 32 chapters and then there's appendix. And I have a short YouTube style video for each one of these book chapters. So if you read the book and watch the video that goes with it all together, that's my full stop, one-stop Holocaust education. And because again, I mentioned that short learning span of kids, this has these short videos. They're only averaging maybe about 3 minutes or so. So it's perfect for a classroom if a teacher wants to teach or somebody's interested in learning about the German occupation, the ghetto, what was it like in Auschwitz, or being a slave in a coal mine, like chapter 9 and 10, and you have Warshnow going on a death march. What happened at Liberation? How did he survive after the war? So all of this, you could just pick whatever you want and watch that. So we're going to go right now to the German occupation, which is chapter 4. And I'm going to play the video for you.
In September 1939, the Germans attacked Poland and the Second World War started. Our town was very close to the German border, and in 3 days they were in our town, Germans. They came in with motorcycles, with jeeps, with all kind of mechanism. The Polish army had horses, and they were running away. The first thing what they did when they came into our town was to give new laws, new orders about the Jewish people. Like the Jewish people, circus stores cannot run by Jews. They got what they call Volkstäuschen. That's they were Polish people, but their parents, their grandparents were German, and they chased out the Jews from the bakeries, from the stores that had food. Every few days a new order came out. The order was the Jews wear a Star of David on the front of the chest and on the back. And if they caught somebody without it, they would shoot him. And they really did. This was going on from the first day that they came in to our town. Because it was Jewish, they had to work for them and beat up and do slave work for them. And this was going on until early 1940, when they start building a ghetto for us.
Okay, so Let me go back here to my book. Sorry, one moment. Okay, and I'm going to now show you chapter 5. That was chapter 4. So if you watch all of these in succession, it's a full-length film that's almost 2 hours. And after this chapter, I put in a short, it's about 3 minutes, chapter 5 on the Nazi statistic campaign, which is basically a voiceover of pictures that show what happened in the Holocaust from the beginning onward. And I've been told by somebody that worked at a museum that they thought that this would be great to show to docents and guides in museums, because just in those few minutes, it gives you a great overall understanding of what happened. So we're going to go now to chapter 5. After Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, he led the Third Reich to become more and more powerful. As German occupation spread throughout Europe, so did the Nazis' radical anti-Semitism. Jews were rounded up, shot, hung, forced to perform slave labor, forced into ghettos. And that's Abe on the far right in this ghetto. Forced to change their names. Deported, and sent to concentration and extermination camps where millions were murdered. They were experimented on and robbed of their belongings by the Nazis before and after death. Somehow, Abe Peck survived the merciless brutality and relentless terror of the Nazis. For him, it was a personal war against Adolf Hitler. Although he survived and Hitler was ultimately defeated, so much was taken from him that his win is still a heartbreaking loss. But what Abe has gotten to do is to tell us his story so we can all learn from the past and work towards a brighter future. Okay, so you can see how powerful just 3 minutes is of, showing pictures illustrating what happened during World War II. And I went through, I would say, thousands of photos from Yad Vashem archives, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. And of course, I used whatever I could find from Abe. He didn't have photos or videos from the camps themselves. So I, had to intersperse that throughout, in order to really make this authentic and illustrate that everything he went through. So after his family was invaded by the Nazis in Shattuck, they tried to escape. They went north to Warsaw, and their horse and buggy wagon caravan was hit by a bomb, killed the rabbi. They went back home. They discovered when they went back to Shattuck that the Germans didn't want any Jews there. They wanted it to become part of the Third Reich. So his family left again, and they went down south to a town called Lask. And there they were told, well, if you bribe the Nazis, you could get back into your town. So they put together all their gold and their silver and pillowcases, and they tried to get back into town, and they could. But surprised, when they got home, they saw that their neighbors had looted everything. They saw them with all of their stuff, their furniture, even down to the pail that they used to get milk from the farmers. And being back home was not much fun, because the Germans started to implement all of those laws that Abe was talking about in the video, where they had to wear the Jewish stars and they couldn't walk on the sidewalk anymore. They could no longer go to school. His mom had to stop teaching. People couldn't travel anymore. If you left town, you were shot. So his father had to close the restaurant. People who had beards were they were sliced off with bayonets. They weren't allowed to pray anymore, to go to shul, synagogue. So life became really, really difficult, and people were starving to death. They had to give away whatever possessions they had left in order to get food. And in May 1940, the discriminatory laws climaxed, and all the Jews in town were forced into a ghetto. So 110 families, there were about 3,500 people in Abe's town of Shattuck, and 500 Jews, which are about 110 families. They were all kicked out of their homes and forced into 2 streets in the worst, most rundown part of Shattuck. And Abe slept on the floor with his sister, and everybody, kids, adults, elderly, everybody was forced to be slaves for the Nazis. So the women would work in their homes and take care of the kids and clean and sew. And boys and men like Abe had to go clean barns out, work on the railroad, and clear snow in the winter. And I hope you heard me when I showed that picture of the ghetto that came up, that Abe was in that was the Shattuck ghetto, and he was in the fence on the far right. So people were starving. His grandparents, the older people, said, hey, this isn't going to last long. This is temporary. This will get better. You'll see it will get better. And what happened? His grandfather died in the ghetto. His aunt died in the ghetto. And the younger people really, didn't think it was going to get better, but nobody thought that they were going to kill all of the Jews. Nobody, young or old, believed that was going to happen. It had never happened before like this in history. But as Abe said, they had no weapons and they had no place to go anyway. So in the summer of 1941, Abe and his father were taken along with 50 men to a working camp called Rawicz on a Polish frontier station. And they were taken in a train, no food for 2 days. And they were lied to. They were told they would have better conditions. And instead they found that they had hardly any food. And it wasn't easy work. They were dredging a river 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they were sleeping on the floor, 50 men packed into a small house surrounded by barbed wire and men with machine guns. So Abe was there for 2 years. His father died there from typhoid. Abe got it too, but that was one. I say this is somebody who really truly had 9 lives, and he had typhoid and somehow he survived. Most people died. So they closed the camps after 2 years, and then Abe was crammed into a train and he was taken to Auschwitz. When he got off the train, he found himself surrounded by men with dogs and machine guns. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to show you Abe talking about Auschwitz. All right, it's counting down. 3, 2, 1. One moment, please. Okay, as you see, we are going to chapter 8, Auschwitz-Birkenau. And there's my embedded link in the beginning photo of the first chapter. Just simply hit the link and you get the video.
From Ravage, they picked us up, and we went. We didn't know where we were going, but when we came, it was Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, when we got off the train, there were more trains coming with women and children, and there was a guy very famous known Mengele. He was the one which selected, walked around with leather gloves and a key, and like to left and to right, to left and to right, to left and to right. We didn't know what this is for. If you were old or too young, you went to the left side, and they took you right to Birkenau, which was a mile away from Auschwitz, to the gas chamber. And if you were capable of working, you went to the right side. And I went to the right side, and he took me to work. Before we got into the barrack that we got, they put a tattoo number on my left arm. And the number that I had was 143 4050. When I got this, I was a teenager. I was 16 years old. I still had it on my left arm. And we went to life. And the rest of the people that went to the left side, there were women, children, old people, young people, which he felt they're not capable of working. They went with trucks, loaded them back on trucks, and they took him about a mile or so to Birkenau to the gas chamber.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there for a moment, and then I'm going to speed ahead a little bit and show you at the end of this video. This is probably my longest video. I have a 70th commemorative section of what Auschwitz-Birkenau looks like today. I wasn't personally there, but my son was. One day I will make it there. And so I figure most people in the world haven't been to Auschwitz and they don't know what it looks like. So fast forwarding some, I will take you to just get a little bit of this section at the end, 70 years after liberation. As you can see, there were a lot of other people who weren't Jews who were killed, but Elie Wiesel famously said that there were other victims who weren't Jews, but all Jews were victims. All right, just jump forward so you can just get an idea of what's in this video. this was on that shirt at the Unite the Right riot that I mentioned earlier in Charlottesville. And here is Auschwitz today. Okay, I'm gonna stop there and come back to you. All right, so I hope by showing you a sample of these videos, you can get a good idea for the flavor of the video version, which I've been told is an invaluable learning tool. I have been the special guest of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum on book signings. I've got another one coming up the end of March, beginning of April. And they showed my videos on screens in the museum store. And I had teachers from all over the country that found it fascinating because there was nothing like that, and purchased the book and that version as well. So really my goal in doing this is a labor of love. It took me about 5 years from starting to write the book until the end, when I had this brilliant idea that I would do this video book. And what spurred that is I'd say a year and a half into writing, and my daughter was in middle school, and she would come home with her friends and she would go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That's my mom's mess on the dining room table. You know, all the papers and the books and the articles." And every one of her friends would say, "What's the Holocaust?" And I found that kind of shocking being here in North Jersey. And then I realized I had to do more than just write the book. I had to find a way for Abe to tell his story. And that is how this video book evolved. So Abe ultimately was liberated in a sub-camp of Dachau called Allach on April 30th, 1945 by the Americans. And he went to live in Kaufering, Germany, near Munich after that. He spent 2 years there. He met his wife, Helen, also a Holocaust survivor. And he was hesitant to have children because he saw so many children were killed. So he was afraid, but he started to see other people having children. And so he and his wife had one child. They came to America, and somebody like him who had no education, didn't speak the language, no money, nobody here, he ended up doing extremely well and buying a custom furniture upholstery business and servicing the likes of Ted Kennedy, Yogi Berra, Kathy Lee Gifford. And he had a wonderful life here in America. And despite all these horrible things that happened to him, what I really loved about Abe was that he was still the kindest, most generous, wonderful person, because he said that all of this bad was done to him. And so he wanted to show that he wasn't an Untermensch. He wasn't a dog, as the Nazis made him. He was a person. And every good deed that he did, every charitable act was another nail in Hitler's coffin. And so he said that's what really, really got him through the Holocaust. It was his personal fight with Adolf Hitler, thus the name of the book, because if Hitler defeated him, then he would be dead. But if he won, then he would have defeated a tyrant, and he would be here to tell the world what happened to his family, his friends, his community, all those people that otherwise would have disappeared and suffered for nothing. So thank you very much. I could go on and talk another 2 hours, but I'd like to open the floor to questions.
Maya, I want to thank you for that presentation. One thing I'd like to comment on is, and nobody's been able to really capture this, and I don't know how you do it, but the incredible cruelty and misery inflicted by the Nazis. I mean, the laws started to take away every bit of humanity from the Jews, including such stupid things as they weren't allowed to own pets. But what's most disturbing is how some of the concentration camp personnel, even in the women's camps, treated the children and women, and the stories of beating them to death and bayoneting them up in the air. I mean, and just the day-to-day misery. You'd have to read book after book after book after book to even become close to even thinking about how bad it is. And yet, you know, we can talk about how bad it was for them, but you really don't get a sense of that. And that's what I wish people could be made to understand, how horrible existence was. You know, it was terrible. I had the privilege of meeting. Did you ever meet Israel Arbeiter in Boston?
No.
Okay, well, he was a remarkable, and we've had a few remarkable survivors tell their stories too. But he was, you know, talking about his experiences, and he's been part of the Shoah and all kinds of things. But again, you can't convey in words in a short period of time how horrible their existence was. So I'm glad at least you're getting the message out. Hopefully people will take an interest. But one of the things I've heard is that, like in the Holocaust Museum, I didn't think they went far enough to make people understand how bad it was. And the comment that I heard was, well, they don't want to scare off the children. I don't know how valid that is, but I wish there was more to let people know how the conditions that these people had to go through just to survive. But I'll shut up and leave it open to anybody else who has comment or question. Please take it away. Oh, and you can unmute yourselves if you have a question.
I have a question.
Yes.
Maya, first of all, it was an excellent presentation and
Thank you.
an important one. I was listening to, before David McCullough passed away, he was interviewed a number of times, but in one interview, somebody asked him about the college students of today, and he said they were historically illiterate. And he gave a number of examples. And it's true, because kids aren't being taught history. And as a result, they're getting everything on the internet, and people actually think it's true. So
You cut out, John. I don't know what happened to John.
you know,
John, you had cut out for a bit.
oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I just said that David McCullough said that college students today are historically illiterate. And the questions that you asked, a lot of questions that he would assume people would know about history, college students, and he's been at Dartmouth, and he's been other Ivy League schools doing seminars, and he thinks it's very sad. And I think we have a national problem in the sense that we're not teaching history the way it actually happened, and it's too bad.
Exactly. That's why I think it's so important that I put all that effort in to do the video book version of it, because there are so many books and kids don't really read books. They're not interested. They want something that's quick and easy. And what is easy? Videos. That's all they do, is they watch, you know, everything is streamed now, right? So they don't even want commercials on a regular program, movies, everything is brought right into their screen on their phone, their iPad, their computer. So to be able to have something like this, where, like I said, it's broken into short segments, because they probably would not be watching, you know, a documentary film on the Holocaust. Maybe a few kids would, maybe they would have had to in school, but for the most part, they don't. So, you know, that's my ultimate goal, is to make this a teaching tool. And it was sanctioned by the New Jersey Holocaust Commission. And I have spoken at schools, and then, you know, COVID hit and the pandemic kind of stopped everything. So, you know, if any of you think that this would be a good fit to speak at a school that you know of, please reach out to me, mayarossauthor.com. I also am working right now with a film editor to take all of my footage and to turn it into what's called a documentary short, which is a, you know, we're aiming for around a 20-minute film that I can enter into film festivals and hopefully raise more awareness for this. Most people have no idea that my video book is out there. It's very hard to market because, as I said, it can only be on Apple. When I first released the book in 2016, they had said, you know, multimedia tablets that could show a video book like this were about 5 years away. Well, we're beyond that 5-year point, and I still don't see them other than the iPad. So I'm hoping that, you know, that's our future. So you know, I'm trying to do my part every year. Richard, I have short chapters, lots of sub-chapters in it. And I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, thank you. And lots of pictures. I have over 160 different images in the book, trying to make it a fast read and illustrate the horrors and the hardships of being in the camp. So Abe talks about, you know, hygiene and being deloused all the time, and you know, what it felt like to be starving with food, how he was so desperate he got to the point where he and a friend were trying to steal food from the dogs because the Germans treated their dogs really well. And so they risked death trying to pull that food away. So I was trying to, you know, really give that understanding of, as you said, Richard, like what it was like on that day-to-day, you know, what you don't see in textbooks and what we really don't understand. So I'm hoping that Abe is able to convey that.
Well, you did a marvelous job, and I want to thank you again. Does anybody else have any questions before we end this meeting? And I will email you, Maya, with some information in a minute.
Oh,
If
great.
you have a
Thank you.
question, you have to unmute yourself with your microphone, because everybody has been muted so that the speaker could speak. So if you have a question, you can
Yeah.
mute yourself.
Do you hear me?
We do?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question. A lot of people try to protect. Can you hear me?
Yeah, do you have two different systems open?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. What age would you think is appropriate for introducing to a child?
Okay, so you're asking me the appropriate age for my book for a child, and that's a great question because, you know, I really toyed with that myself, because this can be traumatizing if it's shown too young. I did have a man who told me that he was reading it to his 8-year-old son every night, and when I heard that, I said to him, I think that is too young. And he didn't think so. You know, he read a new chapter to his son every night, and his son really loved the book.
Wow.
So I wouldn't have shown that to my 8-year-old son. I have been doing a lot of presentations to Hebrew schools for what they call the B'nai Mitzvah class, the 7th and 8th graders.
Yeah.
So they're, you know, around the 12, 13-year-old age.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I think for this, I wouldn't go younger than 11 personally.
Right. And what about the Diary of Anne Frank? What age do you think that would be appropriate for? I mean, the book.
Well, let's put it this way. I have a friend who is vice principal of an elementary school, and in 5th grade, they were reading the Diary of Anne Frank. So that's 10, 11-year-olds.
Yeah. You know, everyone is shielding children. A lot of people try to shield their children from bad things, other than the things that they might see around them. And it is just not facing reality in many ways, you know. And it's as a grandmother of a child who's going to be 11, and I want to buy her some books for her birthday, and I was wondering about Anne Frank.
Again, judgment call, because, you know, this is something that if a child is, every kid is different. So if you know they're sensitive or they could end up having nightmares from this, it's probably not the best thing. They have to be able to handle it.
Yeah, right. Protected child, you know, everything is good. Everything is fine.
Well, there has to be age appropriate, I'm saying.
Yes,
So,
thank you.
Most of Anne Frank's diary doesn't deal with the Nazis per se. It deals more with her own personal experience and look at, right? So it's not something that I think is going to traumatize kids.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Oh.
anyway.
Thank you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes?
yes,
You know, you mentioned that you have spoken at schools. Has Abe been spoken at schools?
yes, that was Abe's mission, was to educate the world, anybody that would listen, any organization. And he did that until his hearing and his eyesight failed and he could no longer do that. And so when he met me and I did this book, he didn't understand video book. He did not understand ebook at all. All he cared about was having this physical book, because this would carry on his legacy, his messages, and his mission was to continue to raise awareness of what hate and intolerance does, and to preserve the memories of the Holocaust, and to make sure that future generations would understand never again. So, you know, I'm hoping that I really helped him to carry on this mission. And by doing the video book, especially when he could no longer go and speak to schools and organizations, that he'll be able to do that indefinitely. And so every survivor that I meet, I encourage them to, you know, to have their stories taped if they haven't already done it.
A few years back, 60 Minutes had a special on this artificial intelligence where they were, I don't know if it was holographically creating the image of the person that was speaking, and I believe it was a Holocaust survivor. And they spent over a week asking every possible question you could think of so that somebody could come up to the kiosk and ask a question, and chances are he had an answer for it. So it was almost as though you were speaking to a live person. And it would have been fascinating if Abe could have put all this in, because, you know, he'd been through so much that it just would be nice to have had that and hear him in his own words, where people believe they're talking with him. Because again, it was an amazing feat of realism to capture this. So I don't know if more has been done on that, but it was pretty fascinating.
Is he still
That
alive?
really is. That's incredible.
Maya, I just wanted to say, I thought your presentation was really wonderful. And I think it's a brilliant
Thank you.
idea, because you're absolutely right. Education is changing dramatically and the attention span is so minimal. And this is all they do now, they capture. But what I wanted to say to you, whether I'm fortunate or not fortunate, my husband and I'm going to say was fortunate to go to Auschwitz. And I will say, if you get to go, and sooner than later, you can't believe what those visions there, and seeing the display of the eyeglasses and the shoes and the suitcase and everything, the hair. Put that into your videos somehow as well when
It
you
is.
get
It
that
is in
opportunity.
there.
It
I'm
is
sorry,
good.
If I
Good.
continued it, that's in there.
Because I was going to say that was the eye opener for me. I mean, of course I knew what it was. My family is from the Holocaust. But to be there and see that absolutely was just such an eye opener. But I'm glad that, but for your own, I hope you get to go sometime and see, get to see all that. It's a fascinating, but in the most eeriest sense, if you understand what I'm trying to
Yes.
say. It's yeah. I mean, it was crazy, but anyway, but thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation. I'm so glad to see. I liked it a lot.
Thank you. I didn't want to spend the whole time showing my videos.
Yeah.
If you saw the rest, I do have those, because my son took pictures of all that and I captioned them and
Great.
put them to music in that video.
And do you have other
first-
books? Do you have other books on video in addition to the Holocaust? Are you doing other things in the history or pretty much
Not
staying with
about
it?
history and fiction.
Okay, okay, okay.
and- and
Wonderful. though.
fiction. Thank you. I
Books
stopped
are
my fiction
available.
writing.
Her
Yeah.
books are available on Amazon.com, so you can
Oh.
check it out.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Well,
Maya,
and the
thank you
video
again.
book-
Maya, one more
Oh.
point. Since you're in northern Jersey, I would recommend that you make contact with the Summit schools. The high
Okay.
school has a general presentation for the high school students sometime. So whether they get into the history courses or an assembly, I would suggest contacting the Summit schools.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's not as easy as you think. It always helps to have a
I
connection.
know
but I
you have
appreciate
to
the
go
lead.
through a process. It's it's step by step, but they have had things like this.
Well,
All
that
right,
would be
good to know. Yeah, I was setting up a couple of them actually when the pandemic hit, so I have to get back to it.
And with that, I want to thank Maya once again, and I'll send out an email link for our next lecture next month. It's coming up soon. Maya, thank you. It was great. I hope you keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. This was an honor. I put my email address in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to me if you have any questions that you didn't get to ask tonight, or
I'll read that off. It's mayarossauthor.com
yes.
for her website, and you can contact her.
Oh, that's not the website. I'm sorry.
that's-
I'm sorry. I wrote that wrong. Maya Ross Author. Whoops. It's at gmail.com. I was talking as I wrote it and I left out the at Gmail.
Is it mayarossauthor@gmail.com?
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm
Okay, so
speaking
the-
as I'm writing.
There you go. Know what it's like.
Okay. Here. Let's get that out there. Get it correctly. And the website, if anybody has not checked out the website, there is lots of information on there. In addition, you could watch the trailer again and
There we go.
learn more. So you have now my address. There's also a contact form page on the Abe versus Adolf website that reaches me as well, but that's my direct email.